Hi there, good afternoon everybody. Thanks for joining me on this Friday afternoon webinar. My name's Chris. The company I work for are the agency Works. We're the sole implementation partner of the Synergist agency management system. So for about the past 12 years or so, we've helped something like 450 different agencies implement Synergist into their businesses. Synergist itself is an end-to-end agency management system. So incorporating things like new business, estimating, quoting, scheduling, time recording, raising invoices through the system. But what we find is that by doing that through one system, not a number of different systems or even a number of different spreadsheets, we can have much better visibility to base our decisions on. So when we speak to the people that we've worked with in the past, you'll see a few of them on the screen there. They tell us that we not only save time, but we can help them increase utilization, reduce over-servicing, increase profitability, and just generally give them better visibility over their projects. So today's webinar is going to focus on the new business aspect about what we do. So first of all, I think, if we set this out here, so we're going to look at planning for new business. So setting out a plan. What do we need to achieve new business wise? And then that naturally moves on into looking at some of the stuff we can do around prospecting, people hunting out new business, how we can track targets. We're likely to want to set and track some targets in the system, how we can create a new business pipeline, and most importantly actually is how this new business might impact on resourcing. Okay, so let's have a look at the planning part then. So this is generally the sort of calculation that we see agencies going through. So in my imaginary agency here, I've got operating costs of £1 million. It cost me £1 million to run the business, and we've sat down and we've discussed it, and we want to make 20% on that. So I need to generate £200,000 worth of profit. So that means I need to bring in fee income of 1.2 million. I know some of you are perhaps sat there thinking, well, what about the sort of third-party stuff, the things that we buy in, mark up and make money on that? I mean, yes, of course you do, but for sort of to simplify things slightly for this webinar, we're just going to focus on the fee income. So like I say, in my agency, I need to bring in £1.2 million worth of fee income. So how do we set about doing this? Okay. Well, I've done this calculation here. So I've considered the team that I've got available to me. So I've got 15 chargeable resources. I've considered the roles that they do. So we've got a creative director and 7 designers, etc. They all work 37.5 hours a week. And I've considered what a reasonable utilization rate is based on the role that they do. So clearly we're going to get a different rate of utilization out of a director than we are one of the designers. I've also considered the average charge rate. So what can I reasonably expect to charge each of these different types of resources out at, which obviously again will vary from role to role. And given that, this calculation shows me actually that my figure of 1.2 million is actually quite sensible. So if we stick to that plan that I've got set out above there of selling that number of hours for that number of resources with that utilization, we should hit 1.264 million. So my 1.2 million turnover is certainly looking reasonable, which is a good thing, obviously. So the plan that we've got there seems to work in terms of the resources that we've got available to us. So in terms of number of hours that I need to sell 311 hours every week, split across these different resources. So I need to sell 311 hours a week, or 1,095 hours a month, or 14,000 just over hours in a year, broken down like this over the different resources. And if I do that and charge on average £89 per hour, I'll hit that 1.2 million. Okay, so that's our plan set out. I suppose that naturally moves on to, well, okay, let's go out there and sell some hours. Let's start to win some business. So the first stage in that is usually the prospecting stage. So here what we're doing is keeping an eye on what everybody's doing in terms of winning new business. So what activities are going on in the agency to to help us towards that target. So we can see we're tracking phone calls, emails, meetings, tasks, whatever it might be, but we can get a handle on the amount and also who's doing them and the split of the different types of activities that we might be carrying out there. Okay, we're likely to want to set some targets. So against both, set targets for individuals. We also might want to set some targets against the organisations we work with, against our clients. If we look here, we can see that Chris, between these two dates, should have done £119,000 worth of new business. We're actually on just over 99, so we're a little bit shy, so we're 83% of target at the moment. However, if we look over here and look at the different, in Chris's sort of personal pipeline, the different stages that each of those things in it are at, we can see that he's actually got verbal commitment for 24 odd £1,000 worth of business. So actually, if most or all of that drops in, that'll more than cover that difference. So all things considered, we're not too bad there. We can see the target we've set against Virgin. So we said we wanted to do 105,000 off them. We're at 86, so we're a little bit off that, but we're over target on the MetaPack account. Okay, so there we go. We've got visibility of how we're doing against our targets. Like I say, always keeping this 1.2 million pounds of fee income in mind. So as an overall pipeline, we're likely to want to see what different stages all these things in our pipeline are at. So we can see these things working through. So I can see how much new business potential we've got that's only initial communication, the very early stages, right through to it drops through the different stages until we've got sort of verbal commitment, almost the go-ahead on it. So that's a very visual representation of a new business pipeline. Wanted to show you this. What's actually driving this is this here, which is another way of looking at the pipeline, really. So we can see the client, who's handling it. We've told the pipeline when do we expect to win this business, or of course lose it. When do we think we're going to get the nod from the client, one way or the other, as to whether we've won this new business. We've put it in a particular pipeline stage. We've given it a rating. We've got the financials here, and we've also applied a weighting to it here. So we're saying at the moment we're 25, 50, 75% confident that each of these individual projects are going to come in and turn into new business, and we can apply all those filters and weightings and categories to the new business reporting we can do in the system. Okay, so once we've got something that's going in the pipeline, once someone's sort of got to the stage where they say, okay, I think you can help us with this, how much is it going to cost? The first step should be this type of thing. So we need to start to plan in this project. So you can see from my Gantt chart, I've broken down the potential project into its component parts, so definition and planning, information architecture, and all the subcategories of those. And you can see that each of the individual bits of the job has got its own distinct start and end date. So we've started to think about the project in terms of timelines. When would we be needing to do the various bits of the job if this was to go ahead? And then what I've done, again, still at new business stage, at pipeline stage, each bit of that job, I've started to estimate what we're going to need on it. So I can see against the wireframing part of the job, we're going to need 3 hours of an account manager, 2 hours of a copywriter, an hour of a social media executive. So what the system can now do is look at these hours we've estimated, look at that Gantt chart and apply them to the correct timings as to when we're going to want to, or when we're going to have to deliver these particular hours. So the reason you might want to do that is if we just pull up this report here. So this first chart that I'm looking at is, at the moment, I've ran a report and I've said, okay, show me what my availability is across my different types of resource. And we can see here my black lines are generally longer than my blue lines, so I've got availability. However, what could make a difference to that? If I was to say, well, okay, this first report is based on live work, but how about what happens if we pull in things that are in our pipeline? You can see that's obviously, for obvious reasons, changed the picture. We can now see that some of my availability, my black lines, is actually starting to go quite seriously into the minus figures. And this might actually be an area where you wanted to use those weightings. So what we can use the weightings for is, if I've estimated 10 hours of a resource's time and I've given that opportunity a 75% weighting, we can tell the system to only use the weighted figure, i.e. 7.5 hours. So it's just a way of overall having a more realistic view on either the pipeline, either in terms of hours that need to be delivered, hours sold, or indeed the financials on the job. Okay, so we've looked at that. What we next thing to do is actually start to put these in people's diaries. So there's an example of a sort of the scheduling tool there. So you can see I've pushed the hours into someone's diary, but the ones that have flashed red here are actually what we would describe as draft bookings. So they're not confirmed yet. Obviously you can confirm them, but we've put them in there as placeholders so that we know that if, when the client says, go, we want that to be a live job, you need to work on this for us, we're going to have the resource to deliver it. So as well as looking at new business in terms of the financials, the pounds and pence, we also need to be considering the impact that that's going to have on our resourcing. Okay. So really, I mean, the next step in the process there is the job will go live and people will be working on it, we'll be recording time and things like that. But that's sort of almost a webinar for another day. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of some of the things that we can do around new business in the system, giving you some ideas. What I'll do is I'll make contact with you all some point next week. I'll drop you a recording of the webinar, and if from there you've got any questions or you want to have a more detailed look into anything, then please obviously drop me an email back. But for now, I shall say have a great weekend to you all, and look forward to speaking to you soon.